Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our center court panel of the day. Really, the last panel that we have. We had a really full day. I hope you were able to watch other parts of it. If not, you'll be able to see them on YouTube or on our own site shortly. Meantime, we have a terrific panel to finish up our festival today. It is an admissions panel. We have UC Berkeley Haas, Eric Haskins, the Executive Director of Full-Time MBA Admissions. We have the Asian School of Business, Emily Press, the Senior Director of Admissions. We have UT Austin, McCombs School of Business, Stephen Sweeney, who's the Director of the Full-Time MBA Recruiting and Admissions Office. We have Susan Hahn from the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Business, who's Director of Admissions and Recruitment. And finally, but certainly not least, we have Nicole T. from the National University of Singapore's Business School. She's Director of the MBA program. Welcome all. I'm glad to see you here, see your smiles and your shiny faces, eager to participate and just throw out a lot of knowledge and wisdom into the crowd. So the first thing I want to do is I want to ask you if you can take us through these recent months for the fall 2020 intake. We know it's been unprecedented in terms of just the mode of teaching, as well as even the admissions decisions that you had to make, given the uncertainty over everything. Test center closures, the move of GMAT and GRE to online formats, the issue over the difficulty of international students getting student visas, the travel restrictions. It's been a challenging time to be in admissions for sure. Eric, why don't you lead off?
Sure, John. Thanks so much for that question. I have to say that's quite a laundry list that you just gave us in terms of. And certainly it was a minefield. But in terms of how our student experience has been, how we brought this class in, I'm excited to say we ended up starting with a hybrid model as our intention for the fall semester. Which was a model that included having students to come on campus in smaller segments, so we were calling pods. Unfortunately, due to the health concerns here in California, we've had to move to a remote model. And so we've actually started the year in a remote model. What's been amazing is the number of students who came through knowing that that was the case and understanding that there was still such a level of community that we were able to communicate and make those engagements happen. It's about the intentionality of engagement. When you can't meet someone in the hallway, you've got to make that additional effort to make that connection happen. And so we launched a number of platforms to make that happen, both internal platforms of engagement, as well as a couple of systems that we're using to keep folks coming through. So to be the direct answer to your question there, we've got an amazing group of students who are on campus in a remote model right now through some of those challenging positions that you mentioned.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll have some classes maybe soon, I hope, and we'll see what happens.
Well, we are having those classes, though. Sorry,
of course. Now, in Singapore, I mean, from what we hear in the United States, Singapore has been very successful at controlling the coronavirus. Are your classes in person?
Yes, absolutely. As of this semester, we started face-to-face classes, so they're all back on campus, and we can have classes as big as 50. So, but all our classes are also offered in hybrid format. So whoever is unable to join the classes for some reason or feel unsafe, coming out, they can choose to join the classes through virtual format. But I have to say that we haven't started the classes for this year's intake. So we took a really tough decision early March to postpone the start to January next year. So we're looking forward to the class joining us in January.
That's great. And what about in Kuala Lumpur at ASB? What's the situation there for the newest class?
Sure, thanks, John. So we actually ended up having our largest year of enrollment this year. So it has actually been a really, I think, great start for us. I think, obviously a lot of challenges that you've mentioned, particularly with getting new international students into Malaysia. So we've ended up starting sort of dual delivery. Our local students are on campus in person taking classes, and our new international students are taking those classes online, both synchronous and asynchronous. Our returning international students are able to come back to Malaysia, and they are also on campus. So I think, we feel pretty positive about the way the situation's been handled in Malaysia. We're expecting to be fully in person with our international students come January. So that's the situation for us here right now.
And does your record enrollment follow record application volume?
So we had a significant increase from last year's application volumes. We also had a significant increase in deferrals. So even with the increase in deferrals, we've managed to still kind of build a class that was about over 50% larger than last year's class.
Wow. What was the actual size of your intake?
It's still relatively small. So we're at 50 students for the full-time MBA.
But that's a big jump then, right?
Yeah.
Good. And at Carlson, are you on a hybrid format?
Yes, we are. So for our full-time MBA program, there are classes happening on campus in person, just in the mornings for a very short period of time, Monday through Thursday. But of course, students do have the option, if they don't feel comfortable attending in person, to stream and attend remotely. Outside of those morning in-person interactions, the rest of the coursework is being done remotely. And then with our working professional MBA programs, those are all hybrid format as well, or remote or asynchronous, specifically for our online program. So yeah, we're seeing the whole mix. Right now, students are feeling more comfortable with the remote learning model, and I do think it has been a good exercise in adaptability too.
Sure.
Making sure we were able to completely pivot, our approach and some of the classroom experiences to a virtual environment. Students are still connecting. And then even on the admission side too, we really tried to see, okay, here's the questions that were coming in, and it was changing day to day and week to week, obviously based on what was happening with COVID and, the economy and all that 2020 was bringing. And so I think for our team, that exercise in pivoting quickly and being adaptable, also gave us the opportunity to kind of reimagine how we connect with candidates too, in a virtual environment that wasn't maybe just, how we would typically do a webinar before. So we had some of those silver linings that have come out of a situation that truly was unprecedented.
That's true. I think everyone has learned a lot. And we've also learned, particularly in admissions, your ability to reach so many greater numbers of people without having to get on all those airplanes and stay in all those hotels and all those far-flung places all over the world. That's got to be a benefit, especially to your families. Stephen, what's the picture look like at McCombs?
Pretty similar. So we're in a hybrid model as well. So thanks for having me also. We probably would be in the same mindset for the second semester or the spring semester as well. Mm-hmm. All of our recruiting is also done, to your point, John, virtually right now. So the building's closed to visitors. But I think to echo some of the other panelists, we have a class as well. So pretty similar size that we've always enrolled. Pretty much the exact same stack in terms of some of those averages that the class of 2021 is. So really we've seen a great class come in. We had to start another or extend one of the rounds, create a rolling round. We did do some test waivers, but we ended up where we needed to be, and we're super happy with the class of 2022.
Stephen, what are your predictions for this coming admission season? There are a lot of people who believe that given the pandemic-induced recession, we're going to see a big surge. And in fact, most of the schools that extended their rounds in the last admission cycle did see a fairly significant uptick in applications. What are you looking at for this coming year? Will it be among the more competitive years? Do you think you're going to see another bump in applications?
So our first round deadline is actually a week from today. So we are slowly starting all the data. We're unsure whether we did some cannibalization by extending the rounds so late from last year to this year, but also to some other panelists, we did get quite a few defers, significantly more than we typically do. It's sort of TBD whether they're going to enroll or whether they're applying to other schools again. So that's a little bit harder to predict, but I would say we do typically see an increase in applications when the economy does take a dip. And so I would think we would have some sort of increase this coming year. I'm not sure it's going to be a massive increase, but we are projecting at least a little bit uptick from last year.
Right. Susan, you think the same?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Stephen is saying as well. We do have a significant portion of defers. It's the largest number of defers we've had in, I don't even know how many years. We ended up this year with an incoming class of 74, which is for full-time the exact same as the year before. So we were lucky, to not lose any ground there. But we have 42 students who deferred. So,
Wow.
that's a really large number. And so, we're thinking through, okay, how do we meaningfully keep these candidates engaged too? So, it's almost, we have our defer strategy in our communication plan, and then, the rest of our admission strategy. But, hopeful that we will see a surge or, an increase. We did get a late surge, as you were mentioning, with the later rounds and just, as the economy continued to evolve. So after May, we actually saw a large spike up in applications. And it does appear, just based on, our login and our application activity, that, people are, excited, and our round one deadline is October 23rd. So hope to be able to report back some positive volume at that time.
Well, if you were to hang on to 30 of your 42 defers, let's just play the theoretical game. And that means that 30 of your seats are already occupied for the next intake in the fall. The obvious question would be, would you increase the size of your enrolled students in that intake?
And we would, yeah. I mean, I think, if someone's a qualified student and will contribute and be a great person and match for our program, we want to have you here. And so that would be a great problem for us to have. So, if you're qualified, we want you to be here. I do too.
Eric, what are you looking at for this coming admission cycle?
So we've actually closed our first round already, and we've definitely seen an increase in applications. As it relates to the challenge for folks applying, we still have a number of seats to fill, and we expect that we'll have a competitive but not overly competitive round this year. And we did some deferrals. Yeah, please go ahead.
Slowly growing your intake as well to get to a better critical mass. That started under Rich Lyons, but it's been very gradual. I imagine that if in fact you get a really big boost in applications, you could make a bigger leap than might have been planned. That's possible.
It's a fair assessment, John. As it looks now, we did grow our class significantly this past year. We had some amazing candidates applying in those later rounds, and there was opportunity there to bring them through. The way we're looking now, though, is we're not likely to grow again. We're more likely to hold where we are or shrink back to a bit more of the steady state that we've been at before.
You went from what to what?
So our typical enrollment is around 296, just shy of 300. We did 330 this year, 331.
Yeah, that's a big boost for
yeah.
It really is. And Nicole, since you're going to enter a class in January, what are you looking at in terms of the size of that class, and in terms of early activity for the next class, what are you seeing?
So we saw a slight increase in the size of the full-time MBA class to slightly over 120, but we doubled our intake for part-time MBAs.
Oh,
so
wow.
that went from 60 to 120. So we are about half part-time and half full-time now. We expect to see a continued trend of increased number of candidates looking at to do the MBA, especially the part-time, as I think candidates are seeking to gain skills to navigate and adapt to the post-COVID world. So yeah, we haven't closed our first round yet, but we are expecting a significant increase in the applications.
Now, a lot of people think that in recent years, the Asian and the European schools have been far more appealing to a lot of international applicants, in part because of a lot of the anti-immigration rhetoric in the United States and the concern over H-1B visas. Emily, have you seen that at all in at your school?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of our messaging resonates with people that are interested in, you know, exploring regions outside of the US. And so we, you know, have managed to see a significant increase in, I mean, our program is about 70% international.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we'll continue to see our international applicant pool grow. I think, you know, we're pretty well positioned in this part of the world to continue to attract kind of international MBA talent. I think, you know, part of that is dependent on travel restrictions and borders opening. Currently, Malaysia isn't allowing new international students to enter. I think, you know, people were still very motivated to start online, but with the intention of being able to come in person next year. So I think, you know, just to kind of go back to expectations for this coming cycle, I think, you know, we have a lot of really positive momentum heading into our round one. We have a significant number of deferrals from last year, but it's a little bit TBD, sort of dependent on the travel restrictions and the borders opening up for us.
And for people who don't know, I should just remind them that ASB is a relatively new school. It was literally created by MIT Sloan School of Management in cooperation with the Central Bank in Malaysia. The Central Bank wanted to have a world-class business school in its country. So they contracted with MIT Sloan. A lot of the professors are still going back and forth from MIT Sloan, but you're slowly building up your own faculty ranks. And of course, the dean, the founding dean of your program is a longtime MIT Sloan faculty member who's really done a great job in establishing the program there.
Thank
So
you.
that's a little background.
That's a great description. Thank you for that, John.
Yeah. The other thing about your program that I want to point out, particularly because of our conversation about everything going virtual, is that your program is probably more experiential than any other MBA program in the world, bar none, which is why I also think is one of the more innovative offerings. But how do you do all that experiential learning in a virtual world?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's definitely been one of our challenges. Just rewinding a little bit to the spring semester, really things started to escalate with COVID, and our students were sort of mid what we call action learning projects. So they're on an experiential project with companies all over Southeast Asia, kind of meant to travel in person on site with those companies. And they did that in the first half of the semester, and then it moved online. But we were still actually able to deliver sort of outcomes that were really positive. I think the companies felt very positive about the impact from the students. The students actually felt really positive about the ability to kind of transition online. So that was really a great sort of learning experience, and also kind of validated an assumption we already had that we could start doing some of these projects virtually and kind of expand the potential project hosts beyond even potentially Southeast Asia. That said, I think there's definitely value in being able to do these projects in person. Our first semester projects, so our current students that just started in the fall, those projects are done in Malaysia. And there aren't currently travel restrictions in Malaysia. So they're still able to do those projects on site. And then again, kind of depending on you know, what travel restrictions look like in the region, we're still hopeful that come January, there'll be countries in Southeast Asia. And obviously there's a lot of variance in kind of travel restrictions from country to country, but we are pretty confident that the students are going to be able to go on site next year.
Right.
Yeah.
I know.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, I think that's interesting because, I mean, we are really big on experiential learning as well. And we found that with the lockdowns and all that inability to travel, although the students can't go on exchange programs, they can't organize face-to-face activities, but we see that actually the amount of the volume of activities have actually increased, but it's just moved online. So students who were previously not participating as much with the activities have, I guess now they have more time, and we see that the students are organizing a lot of those activities on Zoom.
That's interesting. The other obvious conclusion about all this is that this is the way companies are having to act right now. This is the new normal in the corporate environment. Their teams are collaborating and working together virtually because they're not in the offices either. So to a great extent, the experiential learning that's virtual is now mimicking the real project world in the corporate sector. So I think that's a great way to familiarize yourself and get used to virtual work, because the truth is, when the pandemic ends, it's not going to go back to the way it was. I think that there's going to be a lot more virtual work than ever before. And to the extent that so many people work in global organizations, they've been doing this for quite some time anyway. Now, Susan, I know that Carlson also has a lot of experiential learning in its program. I believe, and this is just from memory, but you correct me if I'm wrong, that there are 3 major experiential projects that every full-time MBA goes through, and they can actually pick up more than 3 if they wanted to, 3 different elective offerings.
Yes. So we have in our full-time program what's called enterprises. And so there are 4 different topics that students can choose from: brands, ventures, consulting, or funds. And so it's spread actually across 2 semesters. And sometimes, so it's the second semester of your first year and the first semester of your second year of the program. So strategically timed right before you do an internship and then right after. So you kind of get that practical hands-on experience, which of course is now virtual, as you mentioned. But so students can participate in one of those topics that they're choosing, and then after they complete that enterprise, they can opt to do a second enterprise as well. So it can stretch across 3 semesters in the program, which is really, it's adding to your resume even while you're in a full-time MBA program. Right. And it was funny, I was just, we did a panel event recently with one of our alums who was saying that actually the enterprise experience and the communication skills really helped in a virtual environment, because you're having to communicate and influence in a different way than, maybe he had thought before. So he was kind of leaning into some of those skills of, oh, you know what, back in my negotiations class, or, back in when I was doing this presentation to a client, and, having to flip some of those skills into a virtual world. The MBA experience in our program, he said, that piece of it, that, communications and influencing in a virtual world has been really helpful based on some of the experiential learning that happened in the program.
Right. And Stephen, I want to just return a little bit to what we talked about before, which is this. If in fact applications grow significantly this cycle, does that mean that selectivity becomes more difficult for students? In other words, do admission rates go down, and therefore it takes even more to sort of stand out from the pool? Or do great candidates who really have a passion for the school stand out anyway?
Yeah, I would say the latter. Really, great candidates will stand out always. I think similar to what Eric was saying, we typically come in around 260 students. We came in 240 this year. We're projecting to come back to that 260, but not necessarily grow beyond that, just because it is a differentiator for us. We're not 500 or 1,000 students like some of the peer schools are. And so our selectivity, I guess, would definitely decrease if there was more applications, but at the same time, great applicants stand out really, no matter what round, no matter how many applications, et cetera.
Right. Now, one of the things that occurred that I heard of in the extended rounds is that while many schools experienced a big surge in applicants, some of the applications were put together very hastily, of course, as you would expect. And maybe the candidates didn't look, at least as represented by their applications, as polished as you would normally find. Did you find that to be true, Eric?
Actually, we ended up taking by percentage of our later rounds, quite similarly to what we did in our earlier rounds.
Wow.
So the candidates that we selected were candidates that were well prepared and ready to kind of move forward. We thought, from our perspective, we believe we probably brought forward candidates who were preparing for applications for the next cycle.
Yes.
And so that's most of what we think we saw in terms of the candidates that came through.
That's true. I mean, one of the reasons why I think this is going to be one of the more competitive rounds is, frankly, the big surge that people saw in the extended rounds, a lot of them, of course, didn't get into highly selective programs. So they're going to be people who show up in this new round. Plus, there is pent-up demand, I think, in the marketplace because we've seen a number of schools experience application declines in previous years. Plus, then you have the historical significance of a recession that draws out more graduate students. So I think you have a bunch of things coming together here, plus the deferred international students who are already occupying a certain number of seats in the classes that you'll fill in the fall of next year. So you have a bunch of things coming together that certainly signal this is going to be more competitive. So then the question is, Nicole, what makes it standard? What makes someone stand out from the pool? What are the things that you look for in a candidate that make you say, ah, yes, I want this person in my classroom?
Well, we look at the candidate's story. So where did he or she come from, and where is she going? So what kind of unique skills and passion can that candidate bring? I think that's the first thing that we look at. And of course, then we look at a lot of the traits that recruiters tell us that they're looking for. So, analytical skills, those are important, creative problem solving, and ability to work collaboratively. So those are really, really important. I think to top it all off, I think communication skills are extremely important because without that, I think none of those traits will be able to shine through.
Right. Susan, how do you determine fit at your school?
Yeah.
What applicants bring to the game?
Yeah, great question. So we have kind of three buckets that we're looking at when we're assessing applicants. So the first is, the academics bucket, which could be, GMAT, GRE, or GPA. We did, for this coming cycle, actually just approve a Gmat waiver process for full-time MBA candidates, and that is tied to specific work experience requirements and academic requirements. So that's something new.
Put that into effect?
That was just approved about 10 days ago. So it's very, very new. So yeah, we're piloting that for this year for the full-time program. It did exist before for part-time and online. So again, it's tied to specific criteria.
Would you have to bring to have your GMAT or GRE waived?
Sure, a minimum of 5 years of experience or 4 years of military experience. And we have different GPA thresholds depending on if you were a STEM major in undergrad or a different major in undergrad. And then we'd also give consideration to candidates who have a CPA or CFA as well as an advanced degree too. So those are some of the criteria. Again, like if you are applying for a test waiver and you meet those criteria, we're looking at those dimensions, but certainly we're also looking at your academic performance too very, very closely without, that other additional testing metric. So the academics piece is certainly one. And then the work experience is the second bucket. So, not only what has your experience been, but what is the progression? So I think seeing that story of, increasing responsibility, we actually love to see candidates who are coming from diverse industries and backgrounds because that really adds, to the richness of the class and the discussions. And we want to bring those unique perspectives into the classroom. So for us, I think it's really about, the increasing responsibility and telling that story. And then finally, the overall program match piece of it. And so we have a video question that's part of our application. So that gives us kind of a short, quick snippet of who you are as a person. And honestly, lets you really answer a question in your voice. We want to see you. We want to see how you communicate. And particularly in a virtual world, the virtual piece of it is a nice parallel to what we're experiencing now. And then, of course, our admissions interviews as well. So that really helps us get kind of the holistic view, the full view of who you are as a candidate.
Now, is anyone else waiving GMATs or GRE this year?
We are at Texas, but it's not necessary. It's not tied to work experience or terminal degrees. It's really, you can't take the test. You can't go to the testing center because you or someone's immunocompromised, and you can't take it online because you don't have the hardware or you live in a household with 15 other people. So it's really tied to COVID, not tied to really anything else.
Right. Yeah.
And John, we've always been test optional as part of our admissions process since the first year. So that was kind of built into our process already.
Yes, right. Susan, what were the factors that went into your decision to do a GMAT GRE waiver?
Yeah, I think we were looking at how we did a pretty big deep dive into kind of looking at past classes and experience and saying, okay, going back 5 years, looking at who we admitted, these are the people who would have qualified for a waiver and what were their outcomes in the program. Not only what was their academic performance, but how did they succeed on a career standpoint. And after each class graduates, our team does an analysis, and we're looking at, these people were rated highly in the admissions process. How did, the career services team and the student services team see that how they performed as an actual student? And so we went through some of those analyses as well and said, wow, okay, there actually were a great group of students that would have qualified and met our waiver requirements. It was also below the 50% threshold that is taken into consideration for rankings purposes as well. So we wanted to see, hey, based on, what our criteria are, where would we have ended up in the number of students who would have been eligible for a waiver as well. So we kind of did that math on both sides and, had conversations with our faculty and decided that, we'd like to try this out and offer it to our candidates as an added means of flexibility. And we also know, that flexibility is something that people are continuing to need. And, if we can assess success in our program by looking at other areas based on past classes performance, let's try to do that.
Yeah, and again, for people who have a strong GMAT score or GRE, that doesn't mean they can't apply with it. In fact, they should apply with it.
They absolutely should, because it's an additional metric that goes into merit-based scholarships, and also depending on the industry that you plan on working in. So if you want to go into consulting, private equity, those are industries where employers actually want to know what your GMAT score is. So, there are certainly different factors to consider, depending on what your goals are. And like you said, yes, if you have a GMAT score or GRE score, we would be happy to consider that.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I'm going to assume, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that what that will mean if you don't submit a test score is that your GPA and your transcript in terms of the rigor of the courses you took should assume more weight in your admissions decision because you're looking for, reliability on the academics.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly right. We'll be really, taking a close look at what the specific courses were you took, how you performed in those classes as well.
Eric, a lot of the flexibility that we've seen in admissions in the past 6 months, let's say, has occurred directly as a result of the pandemic, the closure of test centers, the introduction of online GMAT and GRE, the complications of taking those tests, including, the early technical glitches that occurred that many applicants found. What's your take on the online versions of these exams, and how do you treat them in comparison to assessing results from the same exams but delivered at a test center?
That's a good question to ask, John. And I'll add the other complication was for a part of the world, they weren't able to take the online tests as well. So
right.
Big
parts of the world, actually China, for example.
That's where I was alluding. Yeah, absolutely. So how do we take a look at that? At Haas, what we're doing is we are taking a look at all the tests that we're receiving and seeing if we're seeing any indications across the aggregate. Are the online tests showing us something different? Do they look like the in-person tests in some way, shape, or form? That'll factor into our evaluation process to ensure that we are, honoring the circumstances that the folks are taking the testing.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that people who test online tend to perform at lower levels by virtue of that test?
So I've had this question before. Our experience so far has not necessarily indicated one direction or another. And if you look at the sort of anecdotal feedback we're receiving, for some people, it's been a boon. There are folks who can only concentrate when they're on their own and not in larger groups, folks who work a little bit better when they can control the circumstances in their environment. And then, of course, there are those folks who are in very much the opposite condition, where they can't find a quiet space, even within their own homes, to to take these tests because they are not able to. And so
Right.
we're seeing a couple different ends of the spectrum there. Nothing that's popped as the one version of truth, but a lot of individualized experiences.
Yep. You know, an MBA education is expensive. It's an investment even beyond the dollars that you have to pour into it in terms of time and opportunity costs, and a tremendous investment in your own personal energy. A lot of schools have significantly increased their commitment to scholarships for students. So I want to ask each of you, you know, what percentage of your students do get a scholarship? And has that increased over the years? Nicole?
Oh, yes. Great question. It definitely has increased, actually from last year to this year. Last year, we had about a third of them who got some kind of scholarship. This year, we are up to close to 50%. So we recognize the impact of the pandemic, and actually we have plans to increase our scholarship budgets for next year.
And do you give scholarships on the basis of need or merit or both?
It's a combination of both.
Yes. Okay. Emily?
Yeah, so we've been in a, I think, very lucky position to be kind of market leaders on the scholarship and financial aid front. So 100% of our full-time MBA students receive a scholarship, and those range between 50 and 100% of the program fees. We've also mobilized a kind of, those are merit-based scholarships that we deliver at the time of admission. And we also have mobilized a need-based financial aid vehicle where we can offer an interest-free loan that the students will end up paying back after they graduate. And so, yeah, we are still very aggressive in terms of scholarship and financial aid offerings.
And I remember in your first year, perhaps even your second year, you would even put all the students up, room and board included, right?
Yeah, so our program fees include accommodation. So we're a full-time residential program. We've just built a beautiful new campus right in the heart of Kuala Lumpur. Much nicer residential facilities than I ever lived in when I did my undergrad in California. So
You've got to come and visit.
Yeah, they're pretty well taken care of, and those are all included in, as well as the sort of travel associated with Action Learning. We take our students to the US for a month. They take classes at MIT. So that's all kind of worked into the program fees.
Right. How about at UT Austin? The scholarship picture there.
Yeah, so for us, you don't have to apply separately for scholarships. We evaluate the applicants at the same time for admission and scholarships. And so all of the scholarships are merit-based. And so roughly they can range from $5,000 a year to full tuition. About half or 50% of the incoming class does receive some sort of merit financial aid. And the average, it ranges every year, but it's usually between around 20 to 25K. And we have seen an increase in our scholarship bucket over the last year.
Yeah. Net Carlson?
Yeah, kind of a similar picture to UT Austin. So this year, actually, for the incoming class, all of the incoming students received scholarship dollars. So we're really happy about that. Definitely committed to, you know, understanding the position that students are in. While we're considering merit, we're also considering diversity in those decisions as well. And then the average scholarship award is, for the past 5 years, has typically hovered, you know, 25 to 30,000.
Yep. So I asked this too because I want to put into context the investment that people make. Truth be told, you can go and borrow money, and you know, an MBA is pretty much a no-brainer investment. But when you look at the price tags on the websites and you know, fall over in shock, do realize that there's a lot of scholarship money out there. Do realize that the ROI on the degree is very strong. And that I don't think there are many people who ever regret the decision to go for an MBA, even when they have to pay for it full freight. I want to talk about, what do you look at first when you get a resume and a CV from a person? Is there one line that your eye immediately goes to? Eric?
Sure. Happy to answer that. John, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to share that about 40% of the students who come through Haas also receive scholarship dollars, both
course.
merit aid and we also offer need, both to domestic and international students. Want to make sure to share that. Now, if I'm looking
I know Rich was very busy raising a lot of money. So is Shri over at Carlson.
Yeah.
Still is.
You know, and we're doing the same. We haven't stopped. But that one line, because that's a great question to ask. For us, we zone in on impact. So we're looking for where in your application have you shared what you're hoping to accomplish beyond your time at Haas. Like what do you want to actually see and have happen in your communities more broadly? And so as we look into that, we try and map that across our program. Can we get you there is probably the next question that we ask ourselves as we think through carrying through an applicant in their journey.
Now, Haas has 4 defining principles, and when you ask applicants why they applied to Berkeley, many of them cite these principles. Are they evident in a resume?
They can be. I think, so the principles are not unique exclusively to Haas. You know, we codify them as part of our way of speaking out on our principles, but ultimately, things like question the status quo exist in so many different frames and ways and spaces, and to be confident with humility, or to be a student always, you can see that in resumes. You can see that as it relates to who's participated in mentoring programs, who has been members of working groups, who's done work that's beyond the scope of their job or their profession. So it can pop in a resume, absolutely.
Nicole, what do you look at when you look at a resume? What pops out for you?
I look for the kind of unique experiences, unique skills and backgrounds or passion that that person can bring to the class, because it's really important that each one is able to contribute something unique to the cohort's learning experience.
Yeah. Stephen, do hobbies and passions, are that something you look at, or what?
That's interesting you asked that, because a lot of times I do skip down to that lowest section just to a quick skim of a couple bullet points. So they a chef in their spare time, or expert pizza maker, or something to give a little bit more color than job title. But I think to Eric's point, like, we definitely look at impact. So we always coach our applicants not to necessarily describe what they do on a day-to-day basis, but how have they made an impact at their company. And it's okay to jump around if that's the case. We have the optional statement that you can use to give a little bit more color on your resume. So always, put yourself forward. No acronyms if you can stray away from that. But if you can have someone read your resume who isn't from your profession, that's always really helpful. So you can have the admissions committee understand what an engineer does, computer does. So that's really helpful as well.
In what school wouldn't want an expert pizza maker in their class? Forget about the 750 GMAT, the 3.9 GPA, the Ivy League undergrad. The pizza maker is who you want. Come on. What's Friday night without pizza? Susan, is there one particular part of the CV or resume that attracts a lot of attention from you right off the bat?
Yeah, I think, if people really highlight a skills section, so certainly, within each job title, they can do that. But I really like when people are kind of calling out, hey, here's what I am an expert in, here's what I know how to do, and kind of pulling on some of those themes that have already been discussed, because I know that then you're applying those skills to make an impact in your job, to progress in your career, to reach your goals. So to the extent that those skills can be highlighted, and things that, what are the things that you're great at? That's really what I like to hone in on.
Right. Yep. We're already getting a few questions, so I may intermingle some of the questions from our audience with my own questions. Here's one that, we touched upon before, but didn't really answer, which is, given that a lot of students deferred their admits this year, how will this affect the intake volume in the next year, or the year after, for that matter? I would assume that unless a school increases its enrollment, that it would make it more competitive. Am I right?
I think that's fair to say, John.
Yeah,
I think,
yeah, sure.
We at Haas, we were we did a case by case. We didn't do any kind of blanket deferrals, but we still ended up with a significant number of deferrals, more so than we had in any prior year. And what we're looking at now is whether or not candidates coming through map against the students that we've already got as part of our admitted clients. So to that degree, there'll be some impact, but the hope is that it won't be significant because there is still some room within our classes.
So we're, I guess, in a position to grow our enrollment size. So not necessarily under pressure to do so, but there's certainly room for growth, particularly now that we're moving into our new campus. So I don't think that the significant increase in deferrals is going to impact our ability to still admit who we want to admit into the program.
Right. Nicole, how about for you?
I think it's pure math, right? With larger applicant pools, schools have to be more selective. But having said that, we do have plans to increase our intake size. So, just like what we did this year to open a second section for our part-time MBA. So yeah, we'll be open to do that if we see a sharp increase in the volume of quality applicants. So the quality is something that we will not compromise.
Right. Now, not all your schools are, of course, consortium schools because it's mainly a U.S. school kind of thing. I know Berkeley is UT or Minnesota consortium?
We are.
Okay. So I have a question from someone who's a consortium applicant and is wondering how those applications are looked at when, they can't apply to round one. Let's say round one is already passed. So now you're in round two, where typically you get more of your application volume. Is the consortium candidate at a disadvantage not having applied in round one?
Eric, I'll give that to you because our round one aligns with the consortium round one.
Okay, there you go.
And so do ours. So I was open to offer that to you. For us here at Haas, we fold the consortium round one into our round one. So they join the applicants and are considered alongside them.
Great. Okay, so that solves that problem. So let's say you didn't get it in round one. Does it matter?
For us, it doesn't. At the end of the day, a consortium candidate is truly a candidate that is just like anyone from our general applicant pool. We consider the consortium application an on-ramp to our general admissions practices. And so once they're in the funnel, we treat them like the regular candidates.
Stephen, same for you?
Exactly. Yep.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about how each of you imagine the MBA will evolve over the next 5 years. Will it retain its value? Will it increase in value? Some people think that, the MBA market is oversaturated. Some people think, as I pointed out before, that it's awfully expensive. Some people think the ROI has been diminished. Susan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that the skills that you learn in an MBA program are something that are always going to be in demand. So, while maybe the structure or delivery of programs may change, maybe shorter, there may be things that remain that are virtual that are going to stay virtual, even in a full-time program. That could be a change, but when it comes down to it, employers are always looking for people who can think critically, have great communication skills, can work well with others, can think creatively, and, have the ability to attack and solve big problems to make the world a better place. So, I think the content of the MBA, we're still seeing the value. I think the value will still be there. I think, what may change is, the modality or the delivery options and structures may change, but, the overall impact of the education and the experiential learning piece is something that is still going to be valued.
Stephen?
Yeah, I agree with Susan. John, I think you mentioned just the ROI earlier, and just it's such a unique degree in the sense that you're not really going deeper into a particular expertise like either an MS degree or an engineering grad degree. You really are getting that general management skills that it seems like for the future are going to be more important than they are today. We have no idea what computers are going to be able to do in the future with data analytics, but we know for sure you're going to need someone who understands enough to manage that team or to manage the software. And so I think the degree continues to be robust. We hear from recruiters and our corporate partners that they continue to want a lot of all of our students in all of the schools. And so I don't see that necessarily ending anytime soon.
Right. And from the Asian sort of perspective, Nicole and Emily, how do you see the MBA evolving over the next 5 years in your markets? Nicole?
I mean, definitely, I definitely see the value increasing. I mean, I think MBA is something. It's not where you go and pick up technical skills, but it has the power to literally transform individuals. And when we look at what recruiters are looking for, building the critical thinking skills, communication skills, all these are, they will be even more important in the future economy. So, I mean, especially the direction that our MBA is taking, we are focusing a lot on, experiential learning and the transformative impact of the MBA. It definitely has its place. I think that it will continue to be even more important, especially I think in the schools in Asia, gives a really unique platform for them to get access to the growing markets in Asia. There's a really interesting story about Asia. I think that and especially if you look at programs like ours, we are at half the price of what US MBAs are charging. So, definitely if you look at a top MBA, a third or half the price of US MBA, I think it's definitely got a lot of value.
Right. Emily, you see demand in Asia increasing for MBA graduates?
Definitely. I mean, I think, particularly in sort of emerging markets where global MBA talent is really needed, we're seeing, a lot of validation in terms of our value proposition of our MBA students getting great sort of opportunities here in the region and kind of beyond. I think, the rise of generalist needs, the rise of leadership skills in areas where there's kind of booming economic growth and potential. We certainly think that there's a pretty valuable offering in terms of the students that are graduating from our program, and also the sort of ROI to them, to Nicole's point, not necessarily going into debt after you graduate and being able to take on opportunities potentially in markets and regions where, maybe the salary isn't at the same level as the US. Or kind of, more developed economies, but you see significant growth over the course of a couple of years in your postgraduate career that makes a lot of sense. So I definitely see the value continuing to increase in this part of the world. And I think, we're excited about that.
Eric, I'll give you last words.
Oh, well, thanks. I have to echo what everyone else has said. I think the ROI is certainly there. I would say it's beyond skills gain. Right, at the end of the day, when you're looking at a full-time MBA program, you're also looking at the network that it can give you, the opportunities that it plugs you into and that connects. And I'll echo Stephen a bit here. It's such a broad degree. It is one of the only degrees that broadens your opportunities versus narrowing them. If you look at probably all of our schools at the placements opportunities, they fall in so many different fields. They really do give people an opportunity to go through an active self-discovery in a way that I don't think you can in the world of specialized masters in the short programs. And so if that's the type of transformative experience that you're hoping to have, I think the MBA is still the only place to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree, obviously. And, one thing that none of you mentioned that I feel I need to mention is that, look, business is not going to get easier or simpler or less competitive. The opposite is true. Business will become increasingly complex, more influenced by globalization and technology than ever before, than we can even imagine, by artificial intelligence, by machine learning, by data analytics, things that are currently being taught in business school and subjects that are currently being evolved at very fast levels. So going and getting an MBA is to give yourself the skill set for an ever-changing, ever-demanding world of work. And I see tremendous value in that, and I don't see that ever going away. And in fact, if anything, you could even argue that white-collar professionals will could diminish in future years, and the MBA is going to be a very important credential to stay in the game, because more people get displaced by artificial intelligence. There'll be greater emphasis on soft skills, which is a key part of the MBA program, and even great emphasis on the technical and analytical skills that people have. And it will differentiate you in the marketplace. Now, I want to ask one quick last question of all of you. We are in a virtual world today, as we are right now. That means that would-be applicants can't visit your campus, can't sit down for coffee with your students, can't attend a class and be a fly on the wall. So how do they get to know more about the program and whether they're a right fit for you? Emily?
So yeah, I think there's still a lot of options to engage, right? So our particular program is, we're relatively small. We're super hands-on in terms of our admissions process. Our dean, our associate dean, they're involved in prospect calls. So you can actually kind of get to that level of kind of intimacy in terms of learning about our program. Our students, our alumni, they're happy to connect. They always have. Our applicant pool is international. So this kind of Zoom virtual connection has kind of always been the underpinning to our engagement sort of strategy for international students. We're doing virtual coffee chats. We're doing virtual sort of class preview sessions where they can actually still log in and see a class. So I still think that there's plenty of options to kind of engage with the community, really understand what the program is all about, and decide whether it might be the right fit for you.
Yep. Susan, I have found in the, I've had the opportunity to sit in a number of admission committee meetings. And one thing that I always find that comes up is personal contact with a given admissions officer who becomes an advocate for that candidate in the admissions committee meeting. And I'm wondering, in this virtual world, how do I, as an applicant, get one of your admissions staffers to be an advocate for me when I can't really meet them face to face?
Well, we actually are doing virtual one-on-ones, and students can go. We have a calendar posted on our website with all of the open time slots, and the recruiters assign those time slots by program. So the first thing I'd say is, connect with someone on our team or connect with me, and we'll do a one-on-one Zoom virtual session. The other piece of it too is, similar to Emily, we are doing class visits. Our student clubs are actually willing to open up some of their upcoming events for students to sit in and take a preview there as well. So yeah, there still are plenty of opportunities to engage. It's really just about, reaching out, and we'll make sure that we're connecting at a time that's convenient to you. We do morning, we do night, we can do weekends. So we can be flexible. We understand the flexibility is important too.
And Nicole, I'm assuming that's true at NUS as well.
Yes, and I encourage them to sign up for our series of events. We're actually looking to run our experience day, but on a virtual platform. So we're looking at ways to bring the MBA experience to life on a virtual platform.
And what does that look like? What's an experience day?
Well, we'll get students to host it, and then it'll come with videos of perhaps a campus tour, getting students to share their experiences, and perhaps attending a master class.
Ah, okay. So Stephen, at UT, can I actually attend an MBA class online as an applicant?
We are creating some classes just for applicants to attend. So we would love people to come to our brand new facility that we built about a year ago, but that's not happening right now. So hopefully that will happen in the future, but there are plenty of opportunities. Everything is on our website, from one-on-one chats to bigger information sessions to application-based workshops. If you have questions on the letter of recommendation or you get invited to interview, what that looks like. So there are a lot of opportunities, and we have seen the upside is really we can get some pretty prominent alums to do some guest speaking series with some applicants that they never would have been able to come to Austin, and now they can just hop on Zoom. So there is a little bit of upside to all of this.
Now, Eric, since you're sitting in the Bay Area, the bar should be higher for you for all virtual events. So what kind of magic are you trying to make happen?
So it's an interesting thing, and I think I've heard from a lot of you this idea that the connection is still possible. So for us, we've actually thought about it even more broadly than that. The only people that we were seeing on campus were people who could afford to come to campus, people who could make the time, people who could get away from work to do so. By allowing our students, our candidates to connect with us virtually through one-on-one opportunities with individual members of the staff, one-on-one opportunities with any of our HSAs, our Haas student ambassadors, which we have a sign up on our website. We're now giving this one-on-one experience to people much more broadly than we had in the past. And we debuted some pretty interesting classrooms this year, some full virtual classrooms, and we've recorded a couple of those sessions. We're in the process now of finding a way for students to visit those recorded sessions so they can get a sense of what that experience is like. It's a little bit different from a Zoom because it has a multi-camera view, so we're still getting the kinks of what that looks like for people to visit a recorded version. So all of that is coming, and we're excited to be able to share it.
That's great. Well, listen, our time is up, but I just wanted to tell you how much I enjoyed meeting all of you and having this chat. I think we put a lot of information out into the marketplace. I really am appreciative of the time you spent here. This event has been recorded, so it will appear on our website, on YouTube, and elsewhere. We will push it out all over the place. So if you missed part of it or all of it, you will see it on video. Meantime, I want to remind everyone as well that all of our panelists have agreed to go into chat rooms right now. And so you will find the links for their chat rooms just where you found the link for this panel. Go in, make sure your camera is on so you can connect and be seen, ask questions, make them intelligent questions, I hope. Don't make them dumb questions. and enjoy and connect with folks, and you can ask anything you'd like, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to answer them candidly. So Emily, Susan, Stephen, Eric, and Nicole, thank you so much. I really enjoyed all of you. I had a great time myself. So stay safe and stay healthy.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, John.
Thank you very much.